Have you ever been so fed up with your job that you just couldn't keep quiet anymore? Maybe you've had one of those days when everything goes wrong, your boss doesn't seem to understand, and you start wondering if you're being taken for granted. Well, imagine this. You're at the end of your rope, and you decide to vent. Maybe to a coworker, maybe online, or maybe even to a customer sitting across from you at the counter. It feels like a moment of relief, right? But what if, just as you're letting off steam, the person you're complaining to turns out to be the very person you've been talking about, the owner of the company? The person who has the power to change everything, or make things much, much worse. I know, it sounds like the setup for a nightmare, right? But stick with me, because this story is not what you think it is. What you're about to hear isn't just a random tale of misfortune or bad luck. No, this is a story that's going to keep you on the edge of your seat, making you question how well we really know the people around us, and how a single, seemingly innocent conversation can spiral into something far bigger than we could ever imagine. Now, I know what you're thinking, come on, this is just some typical workplace drama, right? But trust me when I say, what happens next is something that will completely change the way you see those random interactions you have every day. Something so unexpected happens that it'll leave you wondering, can you really trust anyone? Especially when it feels like the world is just looking for a reason to turn everything upside down? Let me set the stage for you. Our main character, let's call her Emma, has been working at a small, family-owned diner for the past few years. She's done everything she can to stay on top of her duties, waiting tables, handling customers, keeping things running smoothly, but lately, she's been feeling underappreciated. There are days when it feels like her efforts go unnoticed, and all she gets in return is more work, more pressure, and the same low pay. It's a job that she once loved, but now, it just feels like a constant grind. She's been pushing through, but as the days drag on, she can feel herself getting more and more frustrated, more and more trapped in a cycle she can't escape from. One day, after a particularly exhausting shift, Emma decides she's had enough. She's tired of pretending everything is fine. She's tired of letting people walk all over her. So, she does something she probably shouldn't have done. She lets her feelings spill out in front of a customer. And not just any customer. This particular customer has been a regular at the diner for months. He's always friendly, always smiles, but Emma never really thought much of him. He seemed like any other guy who just liked his coffee and pancakes. But when she vents about how bad things are at work, something changes. The man doesn't react the way she expects. He doesn't get defensive, or shocked, or even tell her she's being too harsh. No, he just listens. He listens closely, nodding every now and then, his eyes never leaving hers. There's something almost unsettling about the way he watches her, like he's paying a little too much attention to every word she says. What she doesn't know, what she has no way of knowing, is that the man sitting across from her is not just any ordinary customer. No, he's the very person who owns the diner. He's the person who has the power to make everything better, or make it worse. But that's not the most shocking part. The most shocking part is how he reacts after Emma finishes talking. Instead of walking away or brushing it off like most people would, he does something completely unexpected. He doesn't get angry. He doesn't criticize her. Instead, he simply asks, "Do you really feel that way?" Emma, who is still caught up in the heat of her frustrations, just nods. It feels like a moment of release, like finally saying everything that's been building up inside her for so long. But the moment she nods, the customer, this man she's been venting to, smiles softly and says, "You're absolutely right. This place could be a lot better. Maybe it's time for a change." In that moment, everything changes. Emma has no idea that this brief conversation is about to turn her world upside down. The person she just vented to isn't just a bystander in this drama, he's the very person with the power to either fire her or save her job, and everything that happens next will reveal just how unpredictable life can be when the line between customer and boss blurs. Now, you might be wondering, what happens next? How does this seemingly simple conversation lead to such a huge shift in Emma's life? What is this mysterious man going to do with this information? Does Emma keep her job, or is this the end of the road for her at the diner? And, more importantly, does she learn something about herself in the process that changes the way she sees not only her job but her entire life? I'm going to take you through every twist and turn of this story, and by the time we're done, you'll be questioning how much we really know about the people we interact with on a daily basis. You'll be on the edge of your seat, eagerly waiting to see what happens next because trust me, this story isn't just about a job, it's about how a single moment, a single conversation, can completely change the course of your future. But let's not jump ahead too fast. Let's keep the suspense building just a little bit longer. Because the most shocking part of this story is yet to come. What happens next is something Emma could never have seen coming. And you'll want to stay tuned to find out if this random encounter with the diner's owner is going to be her ticket to a brighter future, or if it's the moment when everything falls apart. So, I'll leave you with this question. When was the last time you really listened to someone? Really listened? And when was the last time you realized that someone, anyone, maybe even a stranger, has the power to change your entire life, just by being in the right place at the right time? Stick with me, because this story is just getting started. The answer to the mystery is closer than you think, but you'll have to keep watching to find out what happens next. Emma had always been the kind of person who put in the effort, no matter how tough things got. She wasn't someone to just give up easily. Growing up in a small town where everyone knew everyone's business, she learned early on that hard work was the only way to earn respect. At least, that's what she believed. For the last few years, she had been working as a waitress at the diner, a family-owned business that had been around for decades. On the surface, everything seemed fine. It wasn't glamorous, and it definitely wasn't the career she had envisioned for herself, but it paid the bills. And for a long time, that was enough. But recently, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The diner had been struggling. More customers were skipping out on their checks, and fewer people were coming in for the once popular weekend brunches. Even the regulars, the ones who used to be a fixture every Saturday morning, seemed to be staying away. The owners, an older couple who had run the place for years, were starting to show signs of stress, and the atmosphere inside the diner had begun to shift. It was no longer the cozy, familiar place Emma had grown to love. The cracks were beginning to show, and no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't ignore them anymore. Emma's stomach sank. Tyler wasn't the type to call unless something serious was going on, and hearing him this worked up only made the tension in her chest tighten. "Tyler, what's going on?" "I got a letter today," he said, his words coming out in a rushed jumble. "It was addressed to me, but it wasn't from anyone I know. It was like a warning. Exactly like the ones you've been getting. I don't know how they found me, but it was about you, Em. About what you're looking into. It said, stop now, or you'll regret it." Emma's pulse quickened. She had always protected Tyler from the mess of her adult life, trying to keep him out of the dangers and stresses she had dealt with over the years. But now, she realized, whatever this was, this tangled web she was caught in, was threatening him, too. The fact that someone knew about her investigation, enough to target Tyler, made everything feel that much more personal. It wasn't just a job anymore, or a couple of shady characters. This was about her life, her family, and now, even her brother was being dragged into it. "Tyler, you have to be careful," Emma said, her voice shaking despite her attempt to stay calm. "We can't let this go any further. Whoever's behind this, they're watching us." But Tyler, ever the skeptic, seemed determined not to back down. "I'm not scared of a stupid letter, Em. But this is bigger than just some guy at the diner, isn't it? There's something you're not telling me. I know you're hiding something, and I'm not just going to sit by while this goes down." Emma felt a pang of guilt. Her brother had always been her protector, but she hadn't told him everything. There were just too many things, too many risks. She didn't want to drag him into it. But now it seemed like there was no choice. He was already involved, whether she liked it or not. And as if that wasn't enough to deal with, Emma found herself confronting another mystery that was beginning to feel like a cruel joke. That evening, as she walked into the diner, trying to shake off the tension from her phone call, she noticed something strange. The diner had always been a second home to her, a place where she felt a sense of familiarity and comfort despite everything that was happening. But tonight, it felt different. It was as if the very air inside had shifted, grown heavy with secrets. At the far end of the counter, sitting by himself, was someone she didn't recognize. A man in a dark coat, his face obscured by the low brim of a baseball cap. He was watching her intently, not even pretending to glance away when their eyes met. There was something unsettling about the way he was sitting there, too still, too deliberate in his actions. It wasn't just that he didn't belong, it was the way he was waiting. Waiting for something. Or someone. Emma felt her stomach churn. Was this another clue? Another warning? Her thoughts were interrupted when Jeff came up to her, his face unreadable. "We're closing early tonight. You can head out whenever you're ready," he said, his tone colder than usual. But as she was about to leave, the man in the corner stood up and walked toward the door. As he passed by her, he paused for just a second, long enough for Emma to feel his breath on the back of her neck. He leaned in slightly, his voice low enough that only she could hear it. "Stay away from him," he whispered, his words barely audible over the clink of dishes and the chatter of other customers. "Or it won't just be your job on the line. It'll be everything you've ever known." Emma froze, her heart hammering in her chest. What was he talking about? And who was he referring to? Was this about the owner? About Jeff? Sarah? Or someone else entirely? As the door swung shut behind the man, Emma was left standing there, trembling with confusion and fear. It was like the walls of the diner were closing in on her, and every person around her, every single face, suddenly seemed like a potential suspect. She didn't know who to trust anymore. What if the real danger wasn't just the diner or the strange messages? What if the real danger was something deeper, something from the past that no one wanted to remember? As she walked out into the night, the cold air biting at her skin, she knew one thing for sure: the deeper she dug, the more dangerous this mystery became. And she had no idea just how far this would go. But whatever it was, she was already too far in to turn back. The following days after the warning in the diner were a blur of tension and growing dread. Emma couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, followed. At first, she thought it was just paranoia creeping in, the kind of unease that builds when you've been living in a mystery for too long. But then the signs became undeniable. The slow-moving car that always seemed to appear in her rearview mirror, no matter which route she took. The stranger who stood just a little too close to her in the grocery store, his eyes never quite leaving her. The texts, cryptic, unsettling messages that seemed to follow her like a shadow. The worst part? It wasn't just that she was being followed, it was the realization that she couldn't pinpoint who or what was behind it all. It could have been anyone: Linda, Jeff, Sarah, or even the mysterious man who had warned her outside the diner that night. Everyone had become a suspect, and yet, everyone was a stranger. The more she tried to dig, the deeper the hole seemed to get, and the more she felt the walls closing in on her. It was a Wednesday evening when things took a drastic turn. She had just finished her shift, exhausted from hours of serving coffee and pretending everything was normal, when she stepped into the diner's parking lot. The air was thick with the smell of rain, and the faint glow of the streetlights cast long shadows across the empty spaces. Emma had barely taken 2 steps toward her car when she felt a sudden chill crawl up her spine. The car behind her was parked too close, the headlights dimmed but still casting an eerie glow across the lot. She glanced over her shoulder, but all she saw was the reflection of her own anxious face in the side mirror. For a brief moment, she tried to shake it off. It's nothing, just another late-night customer or passerby. But as she reached for her keys, the hairs on the back of her neck stood up. That feeling, the feeling of being watched, of someone lurking just beyond her line of sight, was unmistakable. She froze, her hand hovering over the car door, the key in her grip now suddenly heavy. Her mind raced, replaying every interaction, every warning. Am I being followed again? She felt her pulse quicken, her breath growing shallow, and for the first time in days, the full weight of what she was entangled in hit her all at once. That's when she heard it, a faint click. The sound of a door unlocking. The noise was subtle but sharp enough to make her stomach drop. She slowly turned around, trying to keep her movements calm and deliberate. A figure stepped out of the shadows, a man, tall and imposing, his face obscured by the brim of his cap, the same man who had been in the diner just days earlier. He didn't speak at first. He just stood there, watching her, waiting. Are you following me? Emma asked, her voice shaking despite her best effort to stay steady. He didn't answer immediately, but his eyes, those cold, unreadable eyes, told her everything. He was too close now, and the threat in his presence was undeniable. "You need to stop asking questions," he said finally, his voice low and even. "It's not safe for you. You have no idea who you're dealing with." Emma felt her heart hammer in her chest. She was trapped, surrounded by nothing but darkness and uncertainty. She couldn't run. Not yet. Something about this moment felt like it would define everything that came next. "Who are you?" she demanded, her fear giving way to defiance. "Why are you doing this?" The man stepped closer, his gaze intense, his every movement deliberate. "You don't want to know," he said softly. "You'll never get the answers you're looking for. But you will regret it if you keep going. This is your last warning." Before she could respond, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows as quickly as he had appeared. Emma stood there, frozen, her body trembling with fear and adrenaline. She wanted to run. She wanted to scream. But all she could do was stand there, her mind reeling. What did he mean by "you'll regret it"? And how did he know so much about what she was doing? But just as she was about to get into her car and drive off, a new terror gripped her. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Emma yanked it out, her hands unsteady as she read the message. It was from her brother, Tyler. "Emma," the text read. "Where are you? I need to talk to you. It's urgent. I think they've found me." Her blood ran cold. Tyler's words hit her like a physical blow. They've found him. The very people she was trying to outrun, those shadowy figures pulling the strings behind everything, had now turned their attention to Tyler. He was in danger, and she was the reason. She hadn't just dragged him into this mess, now he was a target. And she had no idea how to protect him. Her thoughts raced as panic set in. She couldn't stay at the diner any longer. She had to get to Tyler, had to make sure he was safe. The problem was, she had no idea where he was or who she could trust. She grabbed her keys and started the car, the engine roaring to life as she sped down the empty street, her mind torn between the fear for Tyler's safety and the overwhelming sense that she was running straight into a trap. As she drove, her thoughts spiraled. Who could have done this? Who was behind all of this? Was it the mysterious customer? Was it someone she'd worked with for years, someone she'd never suspected? Linda? Jeff? Or had her own investigation led her into something darker than she could have imagined? When she finally pulled up to Tyler's apartment, she was almost too afraid to get out of the car. Her hands were clammy, her stomach a knot of anxiety. She rang the doorbell, her pulse racing as she waited. No answer. She rang again. Nothing. She pounded on the door, desperation creeping into her movements. "Tyler, please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Open up." It wasn't until she tried the door and found it unlocked that the true terror set in. She stepped inside, her breath shallow, the apartment eerily quiet. The living room was empty, the lights dimmed. No sign of Tyler. But there, on the kitchen counter, was a single piece of paper. She picked it up with trembling fingers, her heart pounding in her chest as she read the message scrawled across it. "You should have listened. Now it's too late." Emma's entire body went cold. The words were clear, but the meaning behind them was even clearer. Tyler was gone. And whoever had left this note wasn't done yet. They were still watching. Still waiting. The walls around her had closed in, and there was no escaping now. Her phone buzzed again, and she almost dropped it. The message was from an unknown number. It read, "You're not the only one with secrets. Stop before you find out everything." As Emma's mind reeled, she realized the full weight of what she was dealing with. This wasn't just about her job or a mysterious customer anymore. This was about something much bigger, a tangled web of lies, betrayal, and danger that was pulling her deeper with every step. And now, there was no turning back. The deeper she dug, the more people she would lose. She had no idea who she could trust, no idea where to turn next. All she knew was that someone was out there, and they were getting closer. The threat wasn't just against her, it was against everyone she cared about. And the clock was ticking. Emma's heart pounded as she stood there in Tyler's empty apartment, the note still clutched tightly in her hand. The words burned in her mind, "You should have listened. Now it's too late." Her mind raced, frantically trying to make sense of it all. Her brother was gone, vanished without a trace, and she had no idea where to begin looking for him. Her gut told her to call the police, but a part of her feared that any law enforcement involvement would only make things worse. She had already been warned not to dig too deep, and now, the stakes had risen to something much darker than she could have ever imagined. She turned the apartment upside down, searching for any clue, any trace of Tyler. The living room was barren, save for a few scattered magazines and a half-empty coffee cup. In the kitchen, the countertops were clear, except for that damn note. She walked into his bedroom next, hoping to find some sign of where he'd gone. As she pulled open the closet door, her breath caught in her throat. It wasn't the clothes hanging neatly on the rack or the scattered shoes on the floor that startled her, it was the envelope resting on his desk, partially hidden behind a stack of old bills. She opened it, her hands trembling as she read the neatly typed letter inside. If you want to save him, you'll have to stop looking. Everything you think you know is a lie. Trust no one, not even the ones closest to you. The truth is buried deeper than you can imagine, and you're not the first to try and uncover it. But you will be the last. The words were cryptic, but they held an undeniable weight. Who had written this? And why did it feel like she was being pushed further into the web of lies? She felt her world spinning out of control as a thought hit her like a cold wave. What if Tyler wasn't just a victim? What if he knew more than he had let on? Her mind drifted back to all the times Tyler had been strangely distant lately. How he had started pulling away, avoiding certain conversations, leaving abruptly when the subject of the diner or the mysterious events came up. What if Tyler had known something? What if he had been involved in this all along? Emma's thoughts were interrupted by the buzz of her phone vibrating in her pocket. She pulled it out, expecting another ominous message, but the name on the screen made her freeze. It was Jeff, the diner's manager. She hesitated before answering, suddenly unsure of what to expect. His voice was tight, a bit more urgent than usual. Emma, we need to talk. This thing, it's bigger than you think. You need to be careful who you trust. I wasn't supposed to say this, but I can't let you go any further without knowing the truth. Emma's stomach churned. What truth? What are you talking about? There was a pause on the other end of the line. A long, drawn-out silence that made her nervous. I didn't want you to get dragged into it, but now it's too late. The owner, the diner, it's all connected to something you don't understand. The people you're trusting, the ones who've been warning you to stop, they aren't trying to protect you. They're protecting their own interests. Your brother, Tyler, he's deeper into this than you know. He wasn't just another victim. He's been playing his part this whole time. Emma's blood ran cold. She shook her head in disbelief. You're telling me Tyler was in on this? What does that even mean? Jeff let out a long sigh. I can't explain it all on the phone. But you need to meet me. There's something you've been overlooking, something you missed. It's in plain sight, but you've been too focused on the wrong people. Before she could respond, Jeff's voice dropped to a whisper, barely audible. And Emma, the owner isn't who you think he is. Neither is anyone else. Don't trust anyone. Not even me. The line went dead. Her hands trembled as she lowered the phone, the weight of Jeff's words pressing on her chest. Tyler. A part of this. That thought rattled her to her core. All this time, she had been piecing together fragments of a puzzle, trying to uncover the hidden motives of everyone around her, never once considering that someone so close to her could be a part of the conspiracy. She had been so focused on the diner's mysterious customers and the strange encounters, the warnings from unknown sources, that she never took a step back to consider the bigger picture. She had missed something important, something right under her nose. The room around her felt like it was closing in. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't think straight. The truth was slipping further from her grasp with every second that passed. The only thing she knew for certain was that Tyler had somehow been involved in all of this, whether she wanted to believe it or not. In a daze, she grabbed her coat and stormed out of the apartment. She needed answers, fast. If Tyler was part of this, if he had been keeping secrets from her, everything she thought she knew was a lie. But who could she trust now? Jeff? Linda? The strange man who had warned her outside the diner? She didn't know what to believe anymore. As she drove through the dark streets, the weight of the mystery pressing down on her, her mind kept returning to one haunting question. Why had no one told her the truth? Why had they allowed her to walk so blindly into the danger that now surrounded her? Was everyone in on it? Had she been a pawn in someone else's game this entire time? She made her way to the diner, the familiar neon lights of the sign flickering in the distance. But as she pulled into the parking lot, something felt off. She could see the shape of someone standing in the shadows near the back entrance. She couldn't make out their face, but their posture, the way they stood still, almost waiting for her, sent an icy shiver down her spine. She parked the car and stepped out, her legs unsteady beneath her. The figure didn't move. They just stood there, watching her approach. Emma's heart hammered in her chest as she took slow, cautious steps toward the door. Before she could reach for the handle, the door swung open, and Jeff stepped into the light, his face twisted with a mix of frustration and something darker. His eyes were wild, frantic. "You shouldn't have come here," he said, his voice low. "You don't know what you're dealing with. You're digging in the wrong place." Emma stared at him, the puzzle pieces crashing together in her mind. She wanted answers. She needed them. But in that moment, she realized that the biggest secret of all, the one she had been chasing so desperately, was never meant to be found. It was a secret that, once uncovered, would destroy everything. And just as she opened her mouth to demand the truth, everything around her shifted again. Jeff's next words shattered her world into pieces. "I was never just the manager, Emma." He stepped forward, his eyes no longer the familiar ones she had trusted. "I'm the one who's been pulling the strings." Emma's head spun as Jeff's words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. "I was never just the manager, Emma," he had said, the truth that slipped from his lips feeling like a dagger. The weight of it crashed into her chest, leaving her breathless. Everything she had fought for, every piece of the puzzle she had uncovered, suddenly shifted, twisting into something darker than she could have imagined. Jeff, the man she had trusted, the one she thought was trying to help her, had been behind it all. She took a step back, her thoughts racing. How long has he been lying? How deep does this go? The betrayal was suffocating, and she felt her heart hammering in her chest as her mind reeled from the realization. But the worst part, the part that made her feel nauseous, was the fact that he wasn't the only one. Tyler, her own brother, had been involved, too. She could feel it now, the unshakable truth that everything she thought she knew had been an illusion. Jeff's expression was unreadable as he watched her. He knew she had questions, too many of them. She could see the way his eyes flickered, like he was waiting for her to make a move, waiting to see how far she was willing to go to uncover the truth. But what truth? Was she even capable of understanding it anymore? "I don't know what's real anymore," she said, her voice shaking with a mix of disbelief and raw emotion. "You've been lying to me this entire time, Jeff. What's the point of all of this? Why drag me into it? Why Tyler?" Jeff stepped closer, and the air between them thickened, charged with an energy Emma couldn't quite place. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Because it's bigger than you, Emma. It's bigger than any of us. You don't have the full picture, and you never will. But you can walk away from this. You can stop digging. You can forget everything, and I'll make sure you and your brother are safe. Just walk away. For your own good." The words hung in the air, an ultimatum so clear it nearly choked her. Walk away. It sounded so simple, so easy. She could walk away, pretend she had never gotten involved, forget the nightmare that had unfolded before her eyes. Her safety. Her brother's safety. All of it could be secured if she just let go of the truth. But at what cost? The weight of it was suffocating, and her thoughts raced. Could she live with the consequences of doing nothing? Could she live with the knowledge that the people she trusted most had betrayed her, and she had done nothing to stop it? The silence between them stretched on, each passing second pulling at her sanity, until she finally spoke. "She's getting too close," Linda said, her voice tight with fear. "We can't let her find out more." "I know," Jeff replied, his voice betraying the tension in it. "But she won't stop. She's not backing down, and I don't know how much longer we can keep her from the truth. If she finds out what we've been hiding." His voice trailed off, and Emma felt a cold shiver run down her spine. What were they hiding? What was so dangerous that they couldn't let her know? I'll handle it, Linda said. I'll make sure she stays in the dark. She won't get any closer to the answers. She'll walk away, just like we planned. Emma's pulse spiked as the conversation hit her like a freight train. They had been planning this all along. Linda. Jeff. The people she had trusted most. They had known she was getting close to the truth, and they had been orchestrating her every move. They had manipulated her, fed her false information, kept her digging in the wrong places, all to protect the conspiracy that now loomed over her like a dark storm cloud. But it wasn't just about them. It was about something much bigger, something that made her stomach churn with fear. Linda's words had confirmed what she had been suspecting for weeks. The diner, the strange customers, the bizarre events, it was all part of a much larger operation. This is bigger than you, Jeff had said. And now, she realized, he hadn't been talking about her, it was about the scope of what they were involved in. She stumbled back from the door, her breath shallow as the weight of the truth hit her with full force. What had they been hiding? She didn't have time to think, didn't have time to process what she had just overheard. Everything was moving too quickly, the walls closing in around her. She needed to get out of there. She needed to think, to regroup, but just as she turned to run, the door to the diner swung open with a creak, and Jeff stepped into the light, his eyes locking with hers. "You're not supposed to be here," he said, his voice dark, almost threatening. Emma's heart raced, adrenaline pumping through her veins as she squared off with him. She didn't back down. She couldn't. "What's going on, Jeff?" she demanded. "What have you been hiding? What is this all about?" Jeff's expression remained unreadable, but Emma could see the flicker of something in his eyes, a hint of something far more dangerous than she had ever seen. "You don't want to know," he said, his voice quiet but laced with cold menace. "You don't understand what you're up against." "I understand enough," Emma shot back, her fear turning into resolve. "You've been lying to me, manipulating me, and now I'm done. Tell me the truth, or I'll make you." Jeff took a step forward, his demeanor shifting as he stepped into the light, fully confronting her. His eyes were cold, distant. "You don't get it. You think you're just some bystander in all of this, but you're not. You never were. You've been part of the plan from the start. The only reason you've been involved in any of this is because you've been a pawn in a game you don't understand. And now that you've gotten this far, it's too late to turn back. You can't walk away from this anymore." Emma felt her knees go weak, the weight of his words suffocating her. Pawn? She had been a part of this from the beginning. How could she have been so blind? Her mind raced to make sense of it, but the more she thought about it, the less she understood. "What game?" she whispered, barely able to speak as the room seemed to close in on her. "What the hell are you talking about?" "You'll know soon enough," Jeff said, his voice dark and final. "But I'm giving you one last chance. You can walk away now, and I'll make sure you and Tyler are safe. But if you keep pushing, if you keep digging, the consequences won't just be on you. They'll be on everyone you love." The weight of his words crushed her, the danger clear in his eyes. Emma didn't know who to trust anymore. The people who had seemed like her allies were now her enemies, the ones who had been guiding her were the ones trying to control her. And now, with the stakes higher than ever, she was facing a choice, one that could change everything. The truth was there, just out of reach. But so was the danger. She was in the eye of the storm now, and there was no turning back. The moment of truth had arrived, and Emma could feel it. Every step she took towards the diner's back door felt like it was leading her to her fate. The shadows were long, the night thick with an eerie quiet that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. She had learned too much, seen too much to back down now. Tyler was still missing, and she knew, deep down, that the conspiracy she had been investigating wasn't just some petty crime ring, it was something much darker, more insidious than she could have ever imagined. With her heart pounding in her chest, Emma gripped the door handle, feeling the cool metal under her fingers. She had to confront Jeff, had to demand answers. She couldn't let him manipulate her any longer. No more running, no more confusion. She had come too far. Her breaths were shallow, but each one steadied her as she pushed open the door and stepped inside. The low hum of the diner's kitchen was the only sound, the quiet that had once felt comforting now a reminder of the storm that was brewing. Inside, Jeff stood at the counter, his back to her, speaking in hushed tones to Linda. When he heard the door click open, he turned sharply, his face a mask of both surprise and something darker, something more sinister. Linda's eyes widened too, but it wasn't fear that Emma saw there, it was something colder, something calculated. "What do you think you're doing?" Jeff's voice cut through the silence, low and warning. "You've been warned, Emma. This isn't a game. This is bigger than you." Emma squared her shoulders, stepping forward with a confidence she didn't feel, but that she had no choice but to fake. She couldn't let them see her doubt now. Not when everything hinged on this moment. "I know what you're doing, Jeff. And I'm not going to let you get away with it. Not anymore. I've seen enough to know you've been lying to me. Tyler's disappearance, it's not an accident, is it?" Jeff's face hardened, but he said nothing. His eyes flicked to Linda, and for just a split second, there was a flash of something like guilt, or maybe fear. Emma couldn't be sure. But it didn't matter now. She was too far in to turn back. "You were part of it, weren't you?" she continued, her voice rising, the anger and fear mixing in a way that felt almost liberating. "You knew all along. You've been covering for the people behind this entire thing. The diner, the customers, the whole operation. You never thought I'd figure it out, did you? But now I know enough to bring you down." Linda's lips curled into a thin smile, one that Emma had never seen before. It wasn't the smile of someone caught, or even of someone ashamed. It was the smile of someone who had won, someone who had been waiting for this moment. "You don't know anything, Emma," Linda said softly, her voice sweet but chilling. "You never did." Emma's stomach twisted as her mind raced, but before she could respond, something shifted in the room. The door creaked open again, and Emma's heart skipped a beat when she saw who stepped in. It was Tyler. But not the way she remembered him. He looked different, more exhausted, more broken. His eyes were empty, like the light had been drained out of him, and as he stepped into the dim glow of the diner, Emma felt the ground shift beneath her feet. This wasn't the brother she knew. This wasn't the man she had fought to save. The realization hit her like a ton of bricks. Tyler had been part of it too. He had been involved from the very beginning. He wasn't missing, he had been hiding. Hiding from her. "You can stop now, Emma." Tyler's voice was low, but there was an edge to it, a coldness that sent a shiver down her spine. "You've pushed too far. You've seen too much. It's over." "Tyler, no." The words barely left her mouth, choked with disbelief. "Why? Why didn't you tell me? Why were you involved in all of this?" Tyler didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked at Jeff, who gave him a slight nod, one that Emma caught, one that made her heart lurch. Tyler wasn't just involved. He was deeply involved. In fact, the pieces clicked into place like the final piece of a puzzle she never knew she was solving. "Because," Tyler began, his voice eerily calm, "this was never about you, Emma. This was never about protecting you. It was always about us. About keeping things in the family." Emma's knees buckled slightly as the weight of his words settled in. She had spent so long trying to figure out who was behind all of this, trying to find someone to blame, but now she realized the person she trusted most was the one who had been lying all along. Tyler wasn't the victim. He was the mastermind. He had been orchestrating it all, pulling the strings from the shadows. "I never wanted you to know the truth," Tyler continued, his eyes cold. "But now, it's too late. You've uncovered too much. You've seen too much. There's no turning back. You should have stayed away." "But, why, Tyler?" Emma whispered, her voice breaking. "Why drag me into this? Why lie to me all this time?" Tyler's face didn't change, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, a momentary crack in his resolve. "Because I had to," he said, and for the first time, Emma saw the rawness in his voice, the pain he had hidden so well. "Because this wasn't just about you, or Jeff, or even the diner. It was about control. About power. About keeping everyone where we needed them to be." Emma felt a pang in her chest, as if all the air had been sucked out of her lungs. Her brother, the one person she had trusted above all else, had been a part of a far-reaching conspiracy. And now, the true nature of that conspiracy was clear. The diner wasn't just a front, it was a hub, a center for a much larger network of influence and power that stretched farther than Emma could comprehend. Before she could say another word, Jeff stepped forward, his voice cutting through her confusion like a knife. "You've seen too much, Emma. And now you have to make a choice. Walk away, and forget all of this, or we'll make sure you never speak a word of it to anyone." Emma's blood ran cold. This was it. This was the moment where everything would change. She could walk away, leave it all behind, let them win, let them control her. Or she could fight, risk everything to bring down the truth, even if it meant losing everything she had left. With every ounce of strength, she looked Tyler in the eye, her voice trembling with both fear and resolve. "I'm not walking away, Tyler. Not now. Not ever. You've made your choice, and now I'm making mine." Tyler's eyes hardened, but for the briefest moment, Emma saw a flicker of regret. Then, as quickly as it appeared, it was gone, replaced by the cold, calculated look that had taken over him entirely. "Then you leave me no choice," Tyler said, his voice like ice. And in that instant, the room exploded with chaos. Before Emma could react, everything around her seemed to slow. The door behind her slammed open, and she saw a figure rushing toward her, someone she had never expected. A figure from her past, someone she thought was gone forever, someone whose name had never left her lips. Her father. The man who had supposedly died years ago was standing in the doorway, gun in hand, eyes locked on her with a look of cold determination. "Get out of here, Emma," he said, his voice rough. "It's too late for you. They're not who you think they are." And just like that, the final twist hit her. Emma stood frozen in place, her eyes locked onto the man in the doorway, her father. The shock was overwhelming. After all the mysteries, all the twists, she never could have imagined that the one person she thought she'd lost forever would be standing before her, alive, holding the key to everything. Her mind scrambled to make sense of it all. Her father, the man who had supposedly died years ago, was here. But not just here, he was tied to everything. He was involved in the conspiracy, the lies, the manipulations. His presence suddenly turned everything upside down. For a brief moment, she wondered if she was dreaming, if this was all some sick nightmare she couldn't wake up from. The gun in his hand only solidified the nightmare's reality. But the chaos didn't stop there. She had been looking for the truth, searching for answers in a world full of lies, and now the truth was staring her in the face, so complicated, so vast, she almost couldn't grasp it. Her father hadn't just disappeared. He hadn't just died in some tragic accident. He had been part of this underground world, this shadowy network of power and control. All the pieces of her life that never quite fit into place, her brother's sudden detachment, the strange events at the diner, the cryptic messages, were part of the same puzzle. And now, here she was, staring at the man who had been at the heart of it all, the man she had once thought she could trust above all else. The gun trembled in his hand, his knuckles white with the grip. But it wasn't aimed at her, not yet. His gaze flickered between her and the others in the room, as if trying to decide where his loyalties lay. Emma could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating, as the silence stretched out between them. For a moment, she couldn't bring herself to speak. What could she say? What could she possibly say to this man who had once been her everything, and now was a stranger? "Dad," her voice came out in a whisper, raw with emotion, as she took a tentative step forward. "Why? Why didn't you tell me? Why did you disappear? Why didn't you trust me?" Her father's face was unreadable, his eyes hard and distant, but there was something else there, something behind the cold exterior. Regret. Pain. Emma saw it, just for a fleeting second, before it vanished. "I never wanted you to get involved in this, Emma," he said quietly, his voice gravelly with years of suppressed emotion. "But you were always going to find out. You were always too smart, too persistent for your own good." "I had to know the truth," she replied, her voice gaining strength. "You didn't leave me any choice." Her father's jaw clenched, and he seemed to wrestle with something inside himself. The seconds stretched into what felt like an eternity, and in that time, Emma could almost feel the weight of everything that had happened, the lies, the secrets, the people who had betrayed her, all of it pressing down on her, threatening to crush her. But she wasn't going to back down now. She wasn't going to let him, or anyone else, decide her fate anymore. "Listen to me, Emma," he said, his voice low and urgent. You think you know what's going on, but you don't. This is bigger than you. Her father's jaw clenched, and he seemed to wrestle with something inside himself. The seconds stretched into what felt like an eternity, and in that time, Emma could almost feel the weight of everything that had happened, the lies, the secrets, the people who had betrayed her, all of it pressing down on her, threatening to crush her. But she wasn't going to back down now. She wasn't going to let him, or anyone else, decide her fate anymore. Listen to me, Emma, he said, his voice low and urgent. You think you know what's going on, but you don't. This is bigger than you. It's bigger than all of us. You can't just walk away from this now. You've already crossed the line. Emma stood her ground, the anger burning inside her, hotter than it had ever been before. Then I'll finish it. I'll bring it all down. I don't care what it costs me. Her father looked at her for a long moment, the gun lowering slightly, his eyes filled with a complex mixture of love and regret. And then, almost as if the weight of the world had finally gotten too heavy to bear, he sighed deeply, lowering the weapon completely. You always were a fighter, he murmured, almost to himself. I just didn't want you to fight this battle. But if you're set on it, then we're out of time. You need to get out of here, Emma. They're coming. Before she could react, he turned and rushed toward the back exit, disappearing into the night. The sudden movement left her standing there, stunned, trying to process everything that had just happened. The pieces were falling into place, but they were still incomplete. She knew, deep down, that there were more people involved in this twisted game, more shadows lurking in the corners than she could ever have imagined. But for now, this was all she had. Her father was alive. Tyler had been part of the conspiracy. And the diner, the place she had once believed to be so mundane, was the hub of it all. But even as the realization hit her, even as she felt the raw, bitter sting of betrayal, there was something else, something deeper. There were no clear answers. Not yet. And maybe there never would be. The truth, Emma understood now, was never as clean as she wanted it to be. It was tangled, messy, and often impossible to untangle. But that didn't matter. What mattered was that she had a choice, she had the power to decide how this story ended. It wasn't just about the conspiracy. It was about her. About who she was and who she wanted to become. The door slammed shut behind her father, leaving Emma standing in the dim glow of the diner's fluorescent lights. The silence felt deafening now, every echo of her footsteps a reminder of the battle ahead. She glanced at the counter where she had once served coffee to strangers who now felt like ghosts. She thought about everything she had lost, and everything she had yet to discover. But one thing was clear, she wasn't going to let anyone control her anymore. She was going to take control of her own story. As she turned to leave, the bell above the door chimed softly, the sound sharp in the stillness of the night. She didn't know what the future held. She didn't know if there was any hope left for her family, or for anyone involved in the mess they had all created. But one thing was certain, the end of this chapter was only the beginning of a new one. And as the door swung shut behind her, Emma stepped out into the unknown, ready to face whatever came next. There was no going back now. But as she walked away, the last piece of the puzzle clicked into place in her mind, a figure she hadn't thought about in days, the mysterious customer, the one who had been watching her so closely at the diner. Was that person another player in the game? Another pawn, or the mastermind she hadn't even begun to understand? The unanswered questions still hung in the air, casting long shadows over everything she had fought for. And as the night stretched on, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. And with every step she took, the questions grew louder until she could hardly hear herself think. Would she ever uncover the truth? Or had she already crossed a line that could never be undone?